when you're ready.
Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Prime Minister Modi, a short while ago, addressed the nation in his first televised address after the ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Prime Minister Modi said that talks and terror cannot go together. We are not going to give in to the nuclear blackmail. We are going to hit the terror targets in Pakistan on our own terms. Also, while addressing the international community, Prime Minister Modi has said that if, and he has used the word if we are going to talk to Pakistan on Kashmir, it is going to be only on the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. There was no reference to President Trump's mediation offer on Jammu and Kashmir. There was no reference to how the President of the United States mediated to enforce a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Chetan sir, how do you look at the address by the Prime Minister?
I think it was a very strong statement, a much needed statement from the Prime Minister. And the key takeaway for me was there were 3-4 points that he mentioned. One, he equated the Pahalgam attack or even the previous large attacks against India with the 9/11 attacks in the US, with the London tube bombings. So drawing this parallel, I think, was a very crucial point. Because if you look at Western approach towards terrorism, 9/11 attacks was a turning point because for the first time their homeland was hit with terrorism emanating from the same region, the AFPAC region, which is the hotbed of terrorism, which affects India as well. And same with the London tube bombings carried out by Al Qaeda. So drawing a parallel between them, linking them together is a very strong message to the global community. Because generally some countries distinguish between so-called good and bad terrorists. Especially Western countries have this habit. So I think the Prime Minister is telling them, stop making the distinction. Just like 9/11 attack was a big assault on US sovereignty. The London bombings was a hit on UK. Similarly, we have suffered many attacks. India has been a big victim of terrorism. Then asserting India's right of self-defense, stating that we will not distinguish between state and non-state actors. That is a very big statement coming from the Prime Minister. And this sends out a clear message to Pakistan that going forward, India would not wait. India would hit back at terrorism, and even if it's Pakistani military targets, we will take a direct shot at it.
And if you notice this closely, when Prime Minister Modi spoke to the domestic audience, he used Hindi. But while talking to the international community, he specifically used this phrase, talks and terror can't go together.
Right. I think symbolism has a lot of meaning in diplomacy. So if you remember the Bihar speech as well by the Prime Minister after Pahalgam attack, he delivered the speech in English. It was clearly meant for a global audience. Also, he mentioned blood and terror or blood and water can't go together. He also said the terror and trade can't go together. So this means India is very clear that there won't be any engagement with Pakistan. If at all there is an engagement, it would be on the issue of terrorism and POK.
Mukesh sir, Prime Minister also spoke of indigenization. Make in India missiles and drones are now responsible. So this time has come for the Indian made in India products to be launched successfully.
Yes, so I would say that it is not only an appeal to galvanize the public opinion in India, but it was also a larger message sent to the global community. I'll come to that particular aspect of indigenization, but before that, he tried to bring the linkage of all the global terrorist activities happening and the mothership being Pakistan. So that is where, in that context, he brought about the idea of 9/11 emanating from Pakistan, London tube bombings emanating from Pakistan. So that was a larger global message. But at the same time, he invoked Indian scientists and he basically talked about why we need to gain that technological prowess. And in this particular conflict, which spanned for 3 to 4 days, it was very clear that it was the technical edge that our defense forces have, particularly when it comes to air defense, when it comes to the electronic countermeasures. That is why we were able to have that kind of an air superiority where we had. And that is where we could basically pack a punch when it comes to hitting at Pakistan. So yes, that message was very clear. But at the same time, we need to ensure going ahead forward as well that that power differential is maintained. So that is what the Prime Minister's appeal was. And it was good to know that it is not only jingoism, which is laced in the speech, it is also about an appeal to the domestic audience that we need to basically tighten our laces. And it is a long haul that we
And
are.
only a united country can take on this
Absolutely.
challenge. Chetan sir, specifically, I think I may be wrong, but please correct me if I'm wrong. For the first time, I think it was a harsher speech directed at Pakistan. Because Prime Minister directly said, if Pakistan is to survive, it has to dismantle the terror infrastructure on its soil, naming Pakistan, mentioning the terror camps, and giving it a threat that if you have to survive, you have to do this. How do you look at this statement? Very harsh,
I
very
think
strong.
absolutely. I think this sets the deterrent which India is looking for. The attacks that were carried out by India, the retaliatory strikes, that was essentially a symbolic strike on the terror infrastructure of Pakistan. And now the Prime Minister stating that in the open and blaming Pakistan, attributing this directly to Pakistan, sends out a clear, strong message to the deep state that stop sponsoring terror or you will have the consequences.
And he specifically spoke of the targets that have been
Exactly.
attacked.
And I think he called the nuclear bluff as that you can't blackmail us with your nuclear weapons. And India has demonstrated that we can still wage a conventional war within the nuclear threshold.
We have only suspended the military action. Don't give us this nuclear action.
Exactly. And also, please remember, Operation Sindoor is ongoing, and the Indian armed forces have made it very clear. So, which means in the future as well, if at all there are strikes of this manner against India, India would reserve the right for military.
What do you think of this new
Substantial
the
and
new military doctrine being if tomorrow there is an attack and if we can trace the source of that attack in Pakistan, then we are not going to differentiate between the state and non-state actors, which means we are going to attack the Pakistani military establishment.
that puts Pakistani entire military establishment directly in the crosshairs, and that would definitely send jitters up their spine. Because till now, Pakistan always maintained that there is a plausible deniability; these are non-state actors. But now India has called its bluff, and basically we have established a new normal. This is unprecedented in the scale that never had we seen this before, where the prime minister, at the level of prime minister, was there a calling of this kind of a bluff, and meaning that going ahead in the future, we won't distinguish whether it is a military target or whether it is a terrorist infrastructure. We have already hit the terrorist infrastructure. What lies ahead is the military target, and that is not good for Pakistan at all. And please mind you, there is a kind of a jingoism and a kind of a celebratory mood going on in the neighboring state of Pakistan, thinking that they have achieved what they had to achieve. So this particular speech puts everything in the perspective, and we have to keep in mind the previous two speeches or press conferences done by the DGMOs. So this is where it is India seizing the narrative and seizing the control of the information warfare or misinformation warfare that Pakistan has been waging against us.
Two back-to-back press conferences by the tri-services, followed by the address to the nation by the Prime Minister. Is it late? Should Prime Minister have spoken quite early ahead, just like Pakistani Prime Minister did when the ceasefire was announced?
Well, I think on this matter, there is a divided opinion. Some do feel that the Prime Minister should have addressed before, maybe during the course of those 3-4 days, when there was a lot of paranoia across the country. Because the war environment which was created, the climate of war, it did induce a lot of panic, especially in the border states, the border districts. Maybe a message earlier would have assuaged those concerns, reassured the Indian population. But I still think never too late. It's never too late to send out the statement, and the Prime Minister has done it.
But lots of myths have been busted by the two back-to-back press conferences, briefings given by the tri-military
Right.
chiefs.
If you look at the conference that happened yesterday, especially, the armed forces at the DGMO level came out with a lot of detailed information as well regarding what targets were hit and what was the tactical objective of the armed forces. That again establishes India's conventional superiority over Pakistani armed forces. And this is something Pakistan has known for a long while, that it can't win a conventional war against India. That's why it resorts to these subconventional wars and proxy wars. And also, please understand, if you look at covert proxy wars, the only advantage in covert proxy war is plausible deniability. You can keep denying your involvement. Now, India is saying we'll no longer look at the distinction between state and non-state actors. So that is a big doctrinal shift in India's approach towards targeting terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism.
Great. We will take a few questions. I'll go through the comment section. If there are some questions, please let us know if you have any questions. And also, we are coming up with a detailed analysis of Operation Sindoor, what it does to India's credibility in the region, how we have ensured and managed our superiority over Pakistan, and this narrative war that was being waged by Pakistan. How did we bust that narrative war as well? What about the internationalization of Jammu and Kashmir and the supposed mediation offer made by President Donald Trump? If you have any questions, please let us know. Chetan sir, a question for you. Trump said US will not trade with both countries if they will not stop the war. How do you see Trump's intervention and threat to India? Are we losing our strategic autonomy?
If you look at Trump, he's someone who's very transactional. He never wanted to get directly dragged into the India-Pakistan conflict or tensions. He had made this very clear long before. And even when the tensions broke out after the Pahalgam attack, repeatedly from the US administration, we heard that US is not going to get involved. The Vice President J.D. Vance also clearly said this is none of our business. But eventually, the conflict escalated to such a level where it was getting quite dangerous, dramatic as well, of sorts. So that would have dragged US into this, thinking about the consequences. Would it reach the nuclear threshold? That is something that worries the world. So eventually, US has been dragged into it. But now, Trump looks at this as a victory for his own personal image as well. Because if you remember, Trump had promised
not enforce this in Russia,
in Ukraine, Gaza as well. Maybe he thought this is an opportunity. Let's close this conflict as soon as possible, claim credit, and project this as a victory for Trump's foreign policy.
And be eligible for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Peace Prize.
I won't be surprised if he nominates himself.
Ayush is asking, what about the nuclear facility which is about to be damaged in Pakistan? Will it have a danger on the human race?
No, I don't think India would directly attack any nuclear facility as of now.
No, he's asking, there is already a damage which is taking place in nuclear facility. Is that true?
No, there are news reports coming in, but those are largely unverified. And since today's noon, there has been news reports of nuclear leakage and radioactive emissions, etc. But that is unverified.
I think this is largely because of the hit on Noor Khan Air Base.
Noor Khan is the one
where the primary delivery systems are located.
Yes.
But I don't think the warheads would be present.
Warheads
and
are not.
You also need to tell the audience that even if there was a strike on the nuclear facilities, it's not going to produce a chain reaction.
Right.
It's going to engulf the whole world.
Nuclear weapons operate very differently. You need a trigger mechanism for them to detonate.
And usually how it works is the warheads are not mated with the delivery system. They're kept separate for security reasons.
So that is what the misinformation is spreading from, that we have hit the warheads.
That's not the case.
But that is not the case. In the case of Noor Khan Air Base, there has been an attack on the support vehicles for the air base and the building structures, which support the operations. They have been damaged.
I think it was more symbolic, the strike.
It was more symbolic, yes, that we can create damage here.
Damage on your nuclear facilities if required.
Yes.
And also right at the heart of the military establishment.
Close to Islamabad.
Yeah.
You think the ceasefire was a mistake? Particularly, Pakistan is clearly not ready for a long conflict.
Ceasefire was not a mistake. At some point, we should have scaled down the war. And we were not looking for a full-fledged war. Let's be very clear on this. The Prime Minister spoke about India's march towards a Viksit Bharat. A full-fledged war with Pakistan is the last thing we want. That would derail our progress.
Yes.
So a ceasefire was essential. It was coming. But the only concern that I have is the way in which US mediated and how Trump claimed credit for it. It appears as if they've seen India-Pakistan at the same level, on an equal footing. So the de-hyphenation we had between India-Pakistan, it appears that now US is hyphenating India-Pakistan back. And this may pull US between the two countries on Kashmir, and Trump has already offered to mediate as well. So that could be problematic strategically.
But I don't think India would allow Trump.
India wouldn't allow, but maybe US would try to interfere.
But it is very unique to Donald Trump, not the US administration in general, because
Donald Trump previously also has been offering mediation many times, umpteen times, but we have not responded to that.
But if you look at the US administration, the State Department, the CIA, they have a habit of meddling. They have a habit of interfering. So I think that's not going to stop. Maybe this will give them that push to again come back and play that role between India and Pakistan.
But maybe is it a blackmail for a favorable US-India free trade
agreement? Because Trump has mentioned that as well. He's tried equating the ceasefire with the trade relations as well. He has said,
he's a businessman.
He has said, I'll help in the trade deal between India and Pakistan as well. So maybe
Trump is absolutely separate from the reality. He's isolated from the reality. So
because India and Pakistan have been fighting for 1,000 years?
1,500 years, apparently.
Maybe he needs history lessons from Abhishek.
Abhishek sir, yeah. So no, we can't take what Trump says seriously at all.
But you never know. That could be dangerous as well.
What Trump has said?
Yes.
But I feel that you get an opinion that even the state administration is not taking Trump's speech and statements very seriously. So let alone the entire administrative opinion. But then previously also, since the time of Bill Clinton, if you recall, there has always been an effort to internationalize or put US in the mediating table. But now India has come of age, our diplomacy has come of age. So I don't think there is any scope for US
Now, let's say on the Indus Water Treaty, India has said, despite the ceasefire, we will not go back on the decision to keep it in abeyance. Let's say India plans to stop the flow, which we have already tried with some short term measures. Or in the long run, let's say we try to divert the waters with new projects to increase the storage. And obviously, it will hit Pakistan's agriculture. Do you think US would intervene then?
More likely.
in my opinion as well,
Because then you are threatening the local civilian population with
Livelihoods.
these measures.
yeah.
And maybe the world would not take it too lightly.
Right.
And we have to
Sharing
remember,
the hydrological data with Pakistan.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a more overflow of water which may flood Pakistan.
Cause floods, yeah, exactly.
Then it becomes a humanitarian crisis, and then maybe the public perception might favor Pakistan,
Right.
which might not be good. And in fact, India as a country, we are also not that inhumane that we would resort to such cheap tactics. But construction of dams, yes, because Indus Water Treaty was clear as a generosity towards Pakistan.
Right.
But Pakistan has not lived up to its potential.
And also, I think this can help India fully utilize its rights on the
Yes,
western rivers, which we hadn't done, which was our own mistake till now.
it was a great compromise already on our side,
Right.
Due to which Jammu Kashmir suffered.
Exactly.
Because that is a state which should have always had a kind of an energy surplus, given the hydroelectric power potential,
Which could be good for the economy as
which
well.
could be very good for the economy. But then that has not happened.
Right.
So I think India will go ahead to construct a lot of storage structures in the meanwhile. And after that, allow the water flow to happen. But we also have to keep in mind that it has been just 2 to 3 years since there was the massive flooding in Pakistan, which endangered lives of many people. 1/3 of the cultivated area was drowned. So Pakistan is still running from door to door, making people aware about the climate change, etc. And now in the present world, when Europe is extra sensitive about issues of climate change, heat waves and drought, Pakistan, and given the Pakistan-centric opinion in Europe, Pakistan will be able to galvanize some amount of opinion, put pressure on India, but I don't think India is going to buckle under that pressure anytime
What
soon.
about the IMF bailout for Pakistan? Many comments that India should have voted against it, although there was
Right.
no such option.
Exactly.
Can you throw some light on that?
First of all, everyone needs to be very clear on this. With regard to IMF's bailout, which is provided, there is no option to vote no. Either you vote for it because decisions are made by consensus. The only other option you have is to abstain from it. And also, if you look at the voting share,
The
it's
highest is with United States.
United States at 16%. EU, I think, together collectively has around 20%. India's vote share is hardly around 3.5%. So we couldn't have really dented the decision. This was something which was part of the ongoing bailout package. This has largely been misrepresented in the media, or rather, the public also has not understood the nuances here.
Because the timing is
Timing seems like that, but we did oppose it. India did say that Pakistan has a poor track record with regard to its financial management. If I'm not wrong, Pakistan has taken 24 bailouts since 1950s. That speaks volumes about the economic mismanagement in Pakistan. And India also tried linking the funding, the international funding which comes in, with terror financing. And there are clear links to show that. So India raised this opposition, and the only option we had, as per the due process of IMF, was to abstain, which we have done, which was more than enough.
And even in FATF, when there are some groups in Pakistan which have been proscribed by UNSC, proscribed by the State Department of US as well. What Pakistan does, change the name of these entities.
Yeah, right.
So Lashkar-e-Toiba becomes Jamaat-ud-Dawa
Right.
and others. So that's how you try to fool the international community.
True. And if you look at these outfits, the TRF, which is responsible for Pahalgam attack, which is seen as a proxy of Lashkar, just look at the naming.
Yeah.
They've given a secular, internationalized English name just to project this as a local. Kashmiri outfit, which is not the case. It's a clear proxy of Lashkar.
And we also have to keep in mind that this $1 billion or $2 billion bailout that Pakistan has got, this is not going to change the fortune of a basket case economy anyways. So if you take a look at the entire economic structure of Pakistan, it doesn't have might in manufacturing sector. It doesn't have might in services sector. It is just agrarian economy that also is influenced by Indus River system, on which we have a control. So all that Pakistan can wish for right now is to continue to pay the salaries of the army and be dependent on China.
It has a mighty ironclad friend in the form of China.
The height of
and
the-
now Turkey coming in, Azerbaijan coming in.
That is a diplomatic challenge for India. how do we manage this new axis of evil, if I can call it, Pakistan's alliance with Turkey? And for India, it's a sort of a betrayal because we've always been good with Turkey. Even when the recent earthquake happened,
Operation
through
Dost.
Operation Dost, we gave this, humanitarian assistance. And Turkey has taken this stance. And this has largely to do with Turkey's internal politics and its positioning in the Muslim world. But Turkey coming together with Pakistan and China is definitely a concern.
But I hope you will agree that as compared to, let's suppose, a couple of decades back, Pakistan always finds itself now short of allies.
Yeah.
Because if you compare the situation a couple of decades back, you had the entire West Asian nations and Middle East with Pakistan, US siding with Pakistan, China was always there with Pakistan.
The European media, the American media side.
India, all that India had to show on its side was Russia.
Right.
No other country would
And
lend
also
support.
the leading powers in the Islamic world, Saudi
Yes,
Arabia and
that's
UAE, they made a big shift post 26/11 attacks. And I think this is where we have forgotten to give credit to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. His policy of strategic restraint was heavily criticized.
Yes.
Understandable, because people's emotions was calling for something of this sort, strike of this sort. But the policy of strategic restraint did serve India well, at least with regard to the diplomatic action India took. We exposed Pakistan for the first time, attributing these attacks. We galvanized support from US and Europe.
Credible evidence was provided.
Exactly. And that was when Saudi and UAE policy shifted towards India. There was some pressure from the West as well, mainly because American and European citizens were targeted. But I think the Riyadh Declaration, which was signed in 2010 after Manmohan Singh's visit, that was a turning point.
But also Saudis and the Emirates, if you see, they are very transactional as well. You have to keep that in mind. So
They view India as a market.
Yeah, they view India as a market. Aramco is looking at setting up large refineries in India. So as and when India's economic might grows,
Yes.
that is where the kind of affinity towards India will grow in these kind of countries as well. And we have always maintained a very kind of a good bonhomie
Yeah.
with those nations,
And
dating back to the Gulf War as well.
Right. And
So-
Prime Minister Modi has done very well
Yes.
to maintain personal ties with, let's say, MBS,
With the leaders.
Yes.
with the leaders,
With the
with the
leaders.
Crown Prince, with the sheikhs in UAE,
Yeah.
the Emiratis. So I think that
Successive Indian governments have
Yeah.
ensured
Yeah.
that the good relation is there, and that is what we are seeing now. That there is a general weaning away of that alliance away from Pakistan.
Yeah.
Because take a look at 60s, take a
Yeah.
look at 70s. Pakistan never found itself short of allies.
Absolutely.
Right now, all that it can count is the state of Turkey. China was always there, and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, I don't think hardly makes a difference,
Yeah.
other than maybe
True.
supply some cheap oil. I don't think Azerbaijan has got any
Cheap
kind
drones as well.
cheap drones, but then Turkey is there for that. But I don't
And
think
also,
they have.
if you look at the Kashmir issue, when Pakistan would try to bring it at, let's say, UN or OIC, Saudi
Iran was the one who
Yeah.
would block such.
yes, they would block that. Saudi UAE would vote for
And
Pakistan.
Iranian foreign minister was here.
Yeah,
So was the Saudi
Saudi foreign deputy foreign
deputy
minister
foreign
as well.
minister. Chetan sir, you too also address the issue of Bangladesh.
Mm.
Because consistently one of the shining spots of our diplomacy was Bangladesh
Right.
when it was ruled by Sheikh Hasina.
Mm.
After she left, she is in an exile in India. The relationship has deteriorated. Now, see the hostile neighborhood in the form of China, Pakistan, Bangladesh.
Yeah,
How do you look at this neighborhood?
I think
In fact, look at the statement given by the interim head, Mohammed Yunus, as well,
Right.
that, inviting China, that you can break the chicken neck and we can
Right.
set off the North.
and there are reports that Bangladesh has allowed China to use one of its air bases as well, very close to the Siliguri corridor, which is seen as a big strategic threat. For India, this is a challenge posed by its geography.
Or maybe it was a foreign policy blunder, I would say, to keep all
Eggs in
the
one basket.
only focus on
This
Sheikh
is
Hasina
something-
and Awami League.
Yes, this is something we have done in almost every neighboring country. If you look at Myanmar, we invested heavily on the military junta itself without building good ties with other political factions which were there. We did the same mistake in Sri Lanka as well, placing all eggs in one basket, having good ties with one leader, and when the opposition manages to come to power, we lose all the leverage. We have had this with Nepal as well.
Nepal.
When leaders like KP Oli come up, who clearly have an anti-India stand,
Right.
so problems get
But in the
created.
case of Bangladesh, I don't think we had much of an option. You had either the BNP, and BNP has always
No, we
been
had enough
antagonistic.
time since, let's say, 80s to build good ties with BNP as well.
But BNP, whenever it has come to power, if you take a look at it, even in the 90s, they always provided shelter to the Ulfa terrorists and the
In
separatists.
fact, they gave a free space for ISI to operate
Yes.
from
So
Bangladesh.
India didn't have much of an option, and then Supporting BNP would always mean supporting the Jamaat.
But at least opening up a communication channel.
Yeah, that is there. But I also feel that Bangladesh right now is in a state of turmoil. So there is no clear kind of structured arrangement that who is going to come into power or who is going to dictate the terms of.
Awami League banned,
Yeah.
and the public
Yeah.
perception unfavorable towards Sheikh Hasina. I don't see Sheikh Hasina coming back
No,
to power,
back, no,
or
yeah.
her party coming back to power
No.
in the foreseeable future.
Absolutely.
And you can't leave
Yeah.
an important country in our neighborhood
Exactly.
in the lap of Chinese.
That's why I feel our diplomacy should be more diversified. Doesn't matter who comes to power. It could be anyone. It could be a party which you don't like. You may not align with their ideology, but still you have to maintain contacts with them, build back channels with them,
Like we have done with Taliban.
and gain leverage with them. Yes, if you could open up to Taliban, why not to the interim government in Bangladesh?
And look at the statement coming from Taliban.
Yeah.
Calling it terrorism.
Terrorism.
And in fact, supporting India,
Yeah.
not on Operation Sindoor, but
Right.
at least condemning the
Condemning
attack
it.
which took place and not favoring Pakistan.
Exactly.
Because the relationship between Pakistan and Taliban
Right.
is also deteriorating.
True.
What do you think of it?
Yeah, but then in the case of Bangladesh, I would still say that our options right now are limited. We should have worked upon it previously, but right now you don't see even BNP coming into the picture. You have an utter chaos down to the level of the streets in Bangladesh. So I think diplomatic back channels are on, but you still have to wait for a couple of years for the entire thing to unfold. And you also have to keep in mind that Pakistan has been relentlessly working in Bangladesh to build that anti-India sentiment. And that is where...
Despite not getting an apology from Pakistan regarding the 1971 horrific...
They have been
riots.
radicalizing people at left, right, and center at an
Even
incredible
organizing
pace.
support for the war criminals who were
Yes.
convicted.
Yeah.
And Pakistan was backing it.
Rewriting history. Bangladesh also has this history of rewriting the constitution.
Yeah.
Whosoever comes to power, they have learnt it from Pakistan itself. So they rewrite the constitution, they reframe the entire law structure. And that is where I think we were not able to predict what will happen to Sheikh Hasina in terms of the
I think that
quick
was pretty
turnaround.
evident, sir. Because Sheikh Hasina, the sentiments were building up from a long time.
Yeah.
She had taken authoritarian turn from few years. She had crushed
Crippling
the
free speech.
free speech,
Yes.
manipulating elections,
Jailing
jailing
dissidents.
dissidents. I think that was a little too much.
People
Maybe
were
that's where
getting
India
killed.
should have stepped in. India should have slightly put some pressure on Sheikh Hasina not to do that. Because the moment Sheikh Hasina became a slightly authoritarian leader, we saw the spike in these activities.
Maybe she was aloof as well, relying on few trusted confidants and
True.
doing whatever she was advised by these select few people. But towards the end, what about the foreign policy, diplomacy by the government? How to tackle this mediation offer by Trump?
I think going forward, India has to be very cautious because now the US would try to make use of this opening which has been created. Because the US has its own interest in this region. Maybe the US would like to capitalize on the Kashmir issue to try and maybe do something with China as well, given the proximity, the strategic location. The US would like to
And in
step
all
in
likelihood, there is a deal between China and United States.
regarding the trade as well. And the fact that CPEC passes through POK is something that would entice the US to step in, do something about it. And that's why I think India should clearly put its foot down, treat this as a one-off diplomatic blunder, and tell the US very clearly that there is no scope for any third-party involvement. This has to be very clear from the Indian side.
Your last comments?
I think this was a statement by the Prime Minister which was much needed. And in fact, the previous couple of press conferences by the DGMOs cleared a lot of air. The fog of war had created a kind of a narrative hysteria from the other side, which put a lot of insecurity in the minds of the normal public, which is never good. So the Prime Minister coming out, and it was expected that he would give a toned down speech, but the kind of speech that he delivered, that indicates where our intentions lie. And clearly we have redefined the entire threshold and how we see Pakistan and how we will treat the terrorist activities going ahead forward. So that is a kind of a direct threat to Pakistan, which I think was long coming.
And best part was he didn't hold back. He didn't mince his words. It was a very powerful statement.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it for now. As I told you right at the start as well, tomorrow we are coming up with a detailed analysis of Operation Sindoor and what it means for our security as well as our diplomacy and foreign policy. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Good night.